Oh, good. You're here. Once again, the book is called The Flower of Freedom, and we are on chapter 11. Your seat awaits you. Leave your burdens outside the door. Settle in, and as always, the book and my presentation of it are given to you with all rights reserved. Thanks for sharing this experience with us. Ready? So am I. The Flower of Freedom by me, Deborah Reeves, Chapter 11, Shiny Opportunities. The chateau was a very special place before the invasion. The Pomades had been a loving people. The father was a doctor who helped people without charge. In return, the townsfolk brought them the best of their produce. After the chaos of the invasion, it was not that way. When Jean-Luc's father, Thomas Desjardins, had been a young man during the war, it was a place of horror and fear. Jean-Luc was born long after the war was over, but he remembered his father eventually finding the words to tell him about the place, and Jean-Luc wrote it all down in case anyone ever wanted to understand what had occurred. Long after the chateau had become a deserted and haunted mansion, Jean-Luc wrote it all down in memory of the bravery and the sacrifice of the villagers. During the war, the Nazis had rolled in force, and they had overtaken the villages of the Loire Valley. After the initial shock and awe of invasion and the decimation of a society, life settled back into a form of normalcy. The mayor of their village was a collaborator. He was not a bad man. He was simply a pragmatist. He wanted his own people to survive, and for a while, they were better off than most of the other villages. The Nazi commandant allowed them to keep more of their produce. Their citizens were not as hungry as most of the people in the French countryside. No Nazis were murdered in the streets of the town. The citizens were freer to move around as long as none of them went near the chateau, because it had been taken over as a vacation place for the SS men who arrived by train from Paris. The permanent commandant was soon ensconced at the chateau. The former owners seemed to have deserted the place. People speculated that perhaps they had been warned and they ran away, but no one knew until after the war was over. The mayor of the town and the commandant frequently met for lunch, and the mayor was very helpful. He helped to maintain a peaceful environment without much force or effort on the part of the Germans. The kind-hearted commandant wanted to do something to express his gratitude to the mayor and the town. At first, he supplied a few luxury items to the mayor, and that made the mayor very popular. He supplied liquor, silk stockings, food items, and wine. He even sent his friend, a German priest, to meet with Father Joseph, the town's priest. During that meeting, Father Joseph knew that something was very wrong. The German priest had known him, and he thought Father Joseph was an old friend from seminary. However, the small-town priest knew that the German priest was a hound of hell. He was a very political man who knew just how to appeal to the lowest levels of debauchery. Father Joseph kept a friendly demeanor, but he tried and tried to warn those within the congregation, those that he trusted. He was always occupied when an invitation to the chateau arrived. As time went on, the commandant declared that he wanted to do more for the citizens of the town, he suggested that they repurpose the chateau and turn it into a school for suitable children from the town, a residential school. It was whispered around town that a very few lucky children would get free education and free board and food. Every parent hoped that their child would be chosen, if only so that they would be well fed and have an opportunity to excel in the new order. They assumed that their children would become fluently bilingual in German, and that alone would make them far more employable and secure in the future of their transformed nation. Jean-Luc remembered his father's tears of guilt and shame one evening when his old dad had been imbibing. It was only then that he could speak of that time. The drink seemed to equip him to face the horror. Perhaps it forced him to face the events that his sober mind ran from in every second of his daily life. Whichever it was, Jean-Luc's dad only spoke of it once, but it was not something that anyone would ever forget once it contaminated their brain. The townspeople learned from the mayor that the school would be only for girls at first. Boys would be brought in on a second wave when the commandant fully understood the needs of the students and the curriculum. The commandant felt that girls would be easier to handle. They were cleaner and more polite, he said, and the townspeople understood. The people were relieved because they really needed their sons in the field to supply the growing needs of the Reich. Father Joseph tried and tried to warn those within the congregation, but they thought he was spinning another yarn about hell on earth. Parents were required to submit an application. Photos of each girl were taken at the village hall. The commandant would choose the first students with the help of the new local doctor, who arrived not long after the pomades disappeared. The citizens counted themselves fortunate to have such a compassionate commandant, especially when they heard rumors of what was happening in other towns. They thanked their lucky stars that their mayor had the good sense to lead them in better courses of action. Not only would their daughters be well fed and educated, their health care would be fully covered at no cost to themselves. Still, they were startled and somewhat alarmed when 3 girls told their mothers that they had been given extremely thorough examinations by the frequently drunken doctor. When the mayor brought it up to the commandant, he was told that they were covering the total cost of health care, so they had the right and the need to ensure that every girl was in perfect condition. He confided that his superiors were ambivalent about the school, and he reminded the mayor that he had even insisted that the town doctor do the examinations so that they would not be dealing with a stranger. The mayor relayed the message to the parents, and it made some sense. They continued to ignore Father Joseph's strident and worried warnings. That's the end of chapter 11. We really hope that you'll come back for our next edition, our next chapter, chapter 11. It's called The Chosen. Thank you. Your friend, Deborah.